Right, let me begin. As it says up there, my name's Jeff Martin. Shamil, thank you for inviting me here today. It's taken first time we've met. I think we emailed each other back before Christmas, I think, wasn't it? Yep. Yeah, unfortunately, I have 3 small children and a life that's very up and down. So, who am I? Who the hell is this English guy standing in front of you talking about security? I'm an independent physical security consultant. Now, I've heard a lot of words going on here today, and quite frankly, I didn't understand a word of it, all right? Okay, binary codes. It's easier to learn Finnish, honestly. So, Morias. And I take my hats off to you all. You know, you're on a different level compared to me. I feel like Jack Nicholson in that film, A Few Good Men. You know, you need me on that wall, you want me on that wall. You're all the intelligent people, I'm the blunt instrument. So a little bit about who I am. I spent 20 years working for the London Metropolitan Police. I was a police officer, and then before I came here, I was a police sergeant in charge of a team in the central London of covert and emergency operations. Before I was promoted, I was an intelligence officer, and I worked in covert operations, drug squads, robbery squads, and counter-terrorism security. Shamil's asked me here today to give you a different perspective on the threats that we face. You know, you're all aware of cybersecurity threats. You know how lacking, just reading the Finnish newspapers. Yeah, I think there was a data breach not so long ago for the Finnish business cult. 130,000 passwords stolen. Hashing, is it? I believe that's the only technical word I know, so I do apologise. So it's out there, and as well you know, crime has no boundaries. Yep, cybercrime has no boundaries. Physical crime has no boundaries. So I'm here to talk to you today a bit about that. And what I'm going to speak about today is the threats that face us, unfortunately. I'm going to talk about also, I did something fatal today. I changed my speech, which you should never do prior to a speech. I did a talk last week at Tampere Police College on physical security and the competence of security. And that went into great depth. Now, I understand this is your second birthday, and I want to try and keep it light, all right? And you want to get pissed afterwards, and I want to get home to a 15-year-old malt. Okay, because it's my birthday as well today. Okay? Thank you very much. Oh, shit, that's gone wrong. I'm not very technically minded. My technicality with a computer is just to hit it with a hammer. Is it working? Is it working? Come on, you bastard.
Yeah, it's coming. Maybe not.
So I'm the entertainment for you. Gone a bit too far. Oh, Christ, it's all gone terribly wrong. Oh, dear. Oh, dear. Right.
Can you use the arrow keys to go with me?
Can you? Okay, so on a somber note, this week in the United Kingdom, we remembered the 22 that were killed on the 22nd of May in the Manchester bombing. Salman Abdi walked in as they're exiting, Ariana Grande concert, and exploded his improvised device. What I want to talk to you a bit about today, and on from that, is what we call hostile reconnaissance process. And it's something that's used by all criminals. It's nothing new. And it's something that maybe from today you can look into your own, for the companies you work for. You know, what is your physical security? Because something I've come across here in Finland and also in the UK is that we're so concentrating on cybersecurity and what goes on in the IT world, we forget about our security, our physical security. Who's following you into the building behind you? Who's tailgating you? Do you challenge people when they walk into the building with no ID? No, because you're too busy doing your own things. Your head's down on the computers and work, and you ignore what's going on around you. That's no fault of your own, that's just a human nature. Unless you're trained to identify suspects, then you just get on with work. But we all need to change our way we do our security culture, our physical security culture. Because what's happened in the past is not going to go away. Young girl up there was 8 years of age. She was the youngest victim of the Manchester bombing. So what I hope for you today is just take away an insight into British policing, my personal insight, some of the stuff I do. I've got some relatively funny stories, whether you take away that or not. But also, when you go away today, it's just that, as I said before, when you walk into your workplace, when you walk into your university, when you walk into wherever you are, that's going to be your place of work for 8 hours. Who's looking after you physically? You know, if you own a company, start-up company, who's running your security plan? Who's doing your security plan? We forget about it because we hire an office. We think it's got a biometric system that works. We put cameras up. Well, we don't put cameras up in the right place. I can tell you how many businesses I've been into, and their camera placement is awful. The security guards are about as much use as a chocolate teapot, and it goes on. So I've got my notes here because I've changed it all. So this is So as I said, I'm talking about hostile reconnaissance. So where do we go from there? I'm pressing the button. So what threats do we face at the moment?
Just a question.
Go on.
Was the man?
Sorry?
The youngest victim, but
Yes.
the guy
Was the Jew?
Oh, my apologies. Well done. Thank you. This is why I was never a detective, right? The guy on the front was Andrew Parker. He's the head of MI5. And last week, well done. And last week, he attended Berlin and he spoke to every security services in Europe about the continuation of cooperation with the dreaded Brexit. I'm English. Let's not talk about that now. It's embarrassing. However, there are concerns that once we leave Brexit, that our intelligence community may suffer. So he was there last week. Now, he came out of a quote last week, which was, since the Westminster attacks in March last year, there's been 12 foiled attacks by MI5 and counter-terrorism police in London and throughout the United Kingdom. 12 substantial attacks. So what threats do we face? Well, terrorism is quite clearly one that's surrounding us at the moment. It's in the news. The media, unfortunately, like to play on it a lot because it's bad news is good news, as they say. We can't always, and I keep saying this to people, you have to live your lives. Yeah? Terrorism, the likelihood of you being involved in a terrorist incident is very slim. You're more likely to get run over by a bus. However, criminality, organised crime, right-wing extremism is growing, especially in Finland and especially in the Nordic countries and Denmark. Right-wing extremism is on the move. And it's something we need to look into, and we don't do enough. In United Kingdom last year, 4 plots were stopped for right-wing extremism. There were 4 soldiers arrested last year in Cyprus and in the United Kingdom for plotting for a terrorist activity against what we don't know at the moment. So it could be aimed at Muslim community, it could be aimed at the black community, we just don't know. But right-wing extremism is on the growth. So we talk about hostile reconnaissance process. So the initial start is picking a target. 7-7 bombers picked the transportation system in London. That's because 1.35 billion people use London transport system. It's the second busiest system in the world, second to Moscow or second to Russia. So it's an easy target, it's crowded places. So target selection. Now, that comes with open source information. So I'll give you an example of open source information. When I first joined the police back in, we did a lot of work on drugs and prostitution, gangs, etc., and human trafficking. And one of the things we had to do, especially me as a young officer, was being told to go through their bins, which was lovely when you're looking at the back of a brothel house. So you can imagine, just imagine. So as a young probationer, That was my job. Whilst the sergeant and the senior PC sat in the coffee house across the road eating a bacon bay. But the amount of information which people throw away is phenomenal. And it still happens today. We've taken to shredding stuff and things like that now. But open source information, and as you lot will well know, you can find anything on the internet. People put everything on the internet. Social media is a policeman's dream, really. We stopped looking for people. When someone's wanted for a crime, we stopped going to the courts to find, well, not generally stopped, but we stopped a lot going to the courts to look for people because these idiots would put their information on social media. Oh, I'm just down the park with Chantel having a spliff. Oh, well, you really? So there we go, and arrest them. They're not the brains of Britain, but however, it's there. And recently I was on LinkedIn because it's what I use and to try and find work here in Finland as a security consultant, physical security consultant. And I, again, noticed a post, this young lady from Tampere, she posted her CV. Now, it contained her date of birth, her social security number, her home address, a telephone number. Honestly, it was, so I sent her an email private email saying, I suggest you take it down because, that information is vital to you. Your social security number in Finland is not safe, okay? People seem to think that once you give them a social security number, oh, that's it, they can't hack me. Well, that's wrong, okay? So it's out there. Information security is out there. And that's what terrorists will use. That's what criminals will use to find you. And I'm not talking about people like this who are disillusioned and radicalised, that will go and commit heinous crimes. They killed 52 people. I'm talking about, for instance, I used to go into financial institutions, I used to go into the communities and talk to them about security awareness. And it used to frustrate the hell out of me because I would go in and give the information and the talks, and 10 minutes later I'd be across the road having a coffee with my friends, just debriefing, and everything I'd just spoken about wearing your ID badge outside your premises, they're all sitting in the coffee place with their ID, their biometric systems on the table, when I've just told them, don't do that. Because, again, we're not going on criminals, we're not going on terrorism, because let's face it, we're not every day face terrorism, but I'm talking about criminals who want to steal your information. Whether it's corporate espionage, which is on the growth. Super, I've been telling people in this country for a long time, you need to sort out your corporate espionage. Are you doing bug sweeps in your office? I know this sounds like James Bond stuff, but it's true, it happens. It happens in London a lot, and I can tell you it will happen in Helsinki. Because a very good friend of mine, Marcus, who works for the Prime Minister's office, he works for top operations, covert James Bond stuff. They do bug sweeps, and trust me, they find stuff. But it doesn't happen in your businesses. People want to know the information that's going on in your businesses. So open source information. Target selection. Crowded places will always be, oh bollocks. Crowded places will always be a soft target. Transportation systems, concert halls, opera houses. Let me give you an example. I want this information again. Fire evacuation systems, the boards that you put on, health and safety says that they have to be on display, okay? That's fine. But think about the information that you're giving out, okay, to a potential criminal or potential terrorist, all right? They set off a device, they know exactly where you are going, yeah? They know exactly the muster point where you're going to be, and I've spoken to people about this, they put it on their corporate websites. Unless you have to, give it to them once they're through the doors and you've done your security checks and you know who you're dealing with. Then give them the information about, where in case of a fire, we've all had that boring talk. It's the same on the airplanes. Doors are to the right, you just sit there. But you get that information, just think about what it can be used for. You need to start thinking laterally and out of the box. This is a famous picture from the 7/7 bombings. He was a fireman off duty, went into the tunnels and rescued this lady. Training comes on to the next part of the hostile process. We know that Mohammed Siddiqui Khan, who was one of the 7/7 bombers, went to Pakistan in 2001. Now, this was at the time when Al-Qaeda was very much at the front of terrorism. They've not gone away, they're still there. They're mostly on the Pakistan-Afghanistan peninsula, and that's where their camps are. And they have now affiliated groups in Somalia and the Horn of Africa. Their training back then was probably 6 months at a camp. What we saw as we got on through the 2013 when ISIS formed from the Arab Spring was that the internet played a huge part in training. The dark web tour, I'm sure some of you know more about it than I do. The information that was coming out through social media, that it was a very good tool for them, for radicalisation and training. Security services shut the doors, working hard with Turkey, to shut the doors for people to go into Syria. In 2015, we saw a lot of people going across the border into Syria to not just men, but young girls as well, 14, 15 years of age, especially for the area that I worked in at the time, going in to become jihadi brides. If I go back to the days when I was younger and it was the IRA in London. Their ideology was totally different, obviously. Their ideology was to get rid of the British from Northern Ireland. There was very much a political statement, whereas what we're dealing with at the moment is very much, arguably, a religious statement. But still need training. As I said, Mohammed Siddiqui Khan went to Pakistan in 2001, where it was believed he was trained, and then returned to lead and organise the crimes that he went on to commit, or the tragedy that he went on to commit. Salman Abdi, who went into the Manchester bombings, he went to Libya and then believed on to Syria to be trained. Everyone needs training. Unless you're a complete moron, like the one that set off the bomb in Parsons Green, who got the maths wrong. He couldn't figure out the PCP, he couldn't figure out the fertiliser, and he took it all from the internet, and he wasn't the brightest button on the earth. So they need training. Then we come down to what we call advanced surveillance, what we call hostile surveillance. Now, this is something I got involved in 2008 in an area called Canary Wharf in London, which was a prime target for the IRA back in '96. And my job, along with several other officers, was to conduct what they call anti-surveillance, surveillance detection, surveillance deterrent. Now, there is a formula. This is my science for you now, because you're all science people. This is my formula for you now, okay? All right? Covert observation of a target for the purpose of collecting information. Now, it's an ingredient. If you don't have the covert aspect, then you're over and you're going to get spotted. If you don't have the information that you want to collect, if you're picking the wrong target, then it's irrelevant. So covert is exactly what it means. And I'm not talking about, again, James Bond or Jason Bourne, but these people who organise crime gangs will, what they call, contract out. That's what they'll do. They'll contract out to lower crime gangs to conduct covert operations on business premises. Now, they'll fit in quite generally, quite happily. They're very good at what they do, which is why people like me and the security services and those that have been trained for a long time have to work harder on it. Now, I'll give you an example. My first covert operation was at King's Cross Station, St Pancras, which has now been gentrified. It's now been all very lovely. It's very expensive, but at the time when I was there, it was a prostitution gangs and drug dealing gangs. and we were sent in to arrest them, get surveillance on them, collect information, but we had to go in covertly. Now, do you think it would be a good idea for me to sit there in a suit and a pair of shiny brown brogues amongst all the drug addicts and prostitutes and say, I'm not a policeman. No. No, so we had to fit in with the crowd. There was homeless people, there was drug addicts. And you're going to love this, what we used to do was roll our jackets in urine and not wash for a few days. I'm a bloke, there's no problem there, is there really? So, and I was young and I didn't have a girlfriend, so probably the reason why. So that's what we used to do. We used to fit in with the crowds. I had longer hair then. I had hair then. So physical surveillance is very much part of the hostile reconnaissance process. So how can you deter it? How can you guys, when you go into your businesses, when you go into your workplace, how can you look for it? You're not trained. A lot of security staff are not trained. So you go into work and you've already got a security guard, probably at the premises. I don't know, maybe you haven't. Or maybe you just get visited by other armed security every, once a month or something. And they check your CCTV, which is completely in the wrong position. You need to, this is part of what I've been working with in Helsinki, and that's going into companies and talking about physical security and security planning. I think there's a guy from F-Secure who's gone now, but he was talking about security planning. A lot of the words, believe it or not, what was coming through on that talk resonates very much to what physical security is about. And it's looking at security planning, it's looking at the inner circle, firstly, and then going out. So finding your advantage points. It's a very important part of the process, because unless you do the physical security and you get it right, the idea is to plan an attack. Now, whether that's a terrorist attack or whether that's just to steal information from your company or it's to steal your car. Yeah? I'll give you an example. In England, I did try and put the photos up, but they were awful. In the United Kingdom, we have a lot of burglaries. And what happens is, and this is very simple, and this is coding, okay, all right? I'm sure I'd love to put the picture up here, but data protection and all that, I'm not allowed to. There are certain communities that will tag people's homes. You won't know it, you'll come in and out your houses, and on the ground there'll be little marks. Now, 9 times out of 10, you probably think, the gas man's been here. They're trying to dig up the road again, or the council's spraying stuff to get rid of trees. Well, it's not. There are certain tag marks, and I'll give you an example. For outside an old person's home, they will tag it as fragile alone. Yep. You've got a big dog in your house. Not suitable. So they will tag it in relation to how vulnerable or how easy access to premises is. So they're conducting surveillance on your addresses, on your homes. And that happens in London a lot. So it's not just terrorists, and it's not just, at the extreme level that people will target people. It's, burglaries. Is very much part of the physical security layout. Oh no, I did put it.
Just give it a rest.
Can I smash it?
No.
Can I hit it with a hammer?
Just a screensaver, so it goes.
There we go. Look, sorry, I did put it up there. I lied. Policemen lie. No. So yeah, they tag your house. It's not a very clear picture, I do apologise, but they will tag your house. And that's part of the physical surveillance, and they will tag your car. We had quite a high-value cars going missing for quite a long time. They were tagging cars, just a very small dot, probably where your tax disc is. No, we don't have tax discs. We don't have tax discs in London anymore, but where the tax discs used to be, they'd just put a little dot or 2 dots or a little square, and it would determine whether that car was suitable to be stolen and then probably end up in some Eastern Bloc country. That's where it'd end up. On the back of a trailer, gone within 24 hours. I'm very mindful of the time. Security culture. So we've gone through the process, and we talked about, surveillance deterrence. Now, let me flip through it. Did I write that? Yes, I did. So I want to come back to Manchester, just bring it back a bit. I want to come back to Manchester and talk about security culture. London has been a victim of terrorism for a long time, so has other countries as well. And that's where it develops different types of security culture. Streetwise, if you like. I grew up in London. I grew up in a relatively poor area of London with my family, so I was surrounded a lot of the time around gangs and drugs and violence. And for me, it made me streetwise, which is maybe a good copper, but, I can look around here, I know there's a lot of different people from different countries, and we all have different experiences of the level of violence from our countries, which makes us a little bit more streetwise, if you like. We know about street crime. We know how to avoid it. We know when there's a group of people walking down the road, we know that, okay, I'm going to step over the other side of the road now. It's a sense, it's a feeling. I don't know what it is. We all have it. Risk assessment, if you like. So I come back to the Manchester one, and something that struck me, and it stayed with me for quite a while, for a year. They interviewed a mother and a daughter who were leaving the arena when the bomb went off. And the mum said, it sounded like balloons going off. And then we saw the panic and saw people coming back up screaming. She said, when we turned to a steward and asked them what to do, what do we do? And they said, I don't know. And it stuck with me, and I looked into it even further. And one thing that, that even in England, in London, where, as I said, we've always been a victim of terrorism, we have no emergency plans for a terrorist activity. Because, and I'll give you this reason, we've always relied on the emergency services. Private security have always relied on the emergency service, police, London ambulance services, and the fire brigade to turn up and do their job. They've done it so well over the years during the IRA conflict and the IRA bombings that no one's ever changed it. Now, all of us in this room, I'm sure all of you, once in your workplace, have been told about fire drills. I'll come back to fire drills. You all know where you've got to muster. You all know what happens, who the fire warden is. I'm sure must have a fire warden in your premises. It's health and safety law. But there is no health and safety law for an active shooter or for a suicide bomber. The one thing I always see is panic. Now, that's no disrespect to those people that because they're not trained. I was trained, and a lot of officers are trained not to panic in high pressure situations. But to turn around to a steward and say, what do I do? Someone who's in a position of security, someone who's in a position of responsibility, and they say, don't, no, it's not acceptable. And that's not her fault or his fault. That's down to legislation that we need to change. Because even though, Finland is a safe country, I've moved here with my family, I've got 3 young children who speak fluent Finnish, bastards. I'm still struggling. But Finland is changing, and I'm sure those Finns in this room know that, because, you go to Helsinki now, it's a changing environment. And I can go on what's going on in the Horn of Africa at the moment, and in the west of Syria, and the intelligence that's coming through regarding ISIS again. We will have another mass immigration. We will have that come through. It will happen. So we have a different security culture. And one thing we need to rectify is how we deal with active shooters and suicide bombers and anything like that happens to us within the community. It may never happen, but, how often do fires happen these days? Not at all, really. We've got sprinklers, we've got fire alarms, we've got fire brigade who come and inspect the premises all the time. Who's inspecting you? Who knows? When you go out to your firm, your company, ask them. Your university, ask them. Who's your security manager? What's your security plan if something like a Mumbai attack happens? Because Finland has firearms. it doesn't necessarily mean a terrorist. Has it gone off again? Oh, fuck. It doesn't necessarily mean a terrorist because most, and I said the meeting I went to, or the conference I went to last week, there was a doctor there, Dr. Mohammed Ahmed, who is a psychologist for radicalisation in one of the high-risk prisons in London, in England, for where they basically put terrorists or suspected terrorists that have been radicalised. And one thing he said was, and one thing his professional opinion was, that most of the people that commit these atrocities have mental health issues. Some form of mental health issue. Whether it's drug-induced over the time. If we go back to Muhammad Sadiq Khan, you know, he claimed to be a good Muslim and claimed to be but prior to that he was a drug dealer in a community. Just bear with me, I'll finish off. Any questions you want to ask, please don't hesitate to ask after. So you reflect back to you look into the history of the people that commit these crimes, and they all have some form of mental health issue. What do I get to? Right? Oh, forget it. I said we're security culture. Now in England we say run, hide, tell. I noticed the other day the Finnish police have put out or the Finnish authorities have put out a very similar one. What's happened? Oh yeah. Yeah, perfect. The one thing I noticed the other day is, said like Finnish authorities have put out run, hide, tell as well. America, run, hide, fight. Now, I don't mean to disrespect the Americans, but this just shows the difference in culture, especially with the Europeans to the Americans. If there are any Americans in this room, I do apologise. I do apologise. But it's just a reflection. We love Americans. Especially Donald Trump. What a man. He tweets like a girl. So, coming back to, sorry, I've lost track now. So, that's all right. So security culture needs to change. I mean, you know, I spoke to my wife about it. You know, she gets frustrated by it, you know, by the security culture. There is, in Finland, and again, I don't mean to be disrespectful, I've already slagged off the Americans, now I'm going to slag off the Finns, but there is no security culture here. There is none, because you haven't needed it before. You know, my wife used to tell me about the times when you put a broomstick in front of the door, and if you weren't in, your neighbour would take the broomstick away and go in and make themselves a cup of coffee and wait for you to come home.
Yeah, but when a thing is born, they have a sticker on the bum. Like
Never what? Sticker on the bum. It's safe. Yeah. And so it should be, you know. That's why I moved here. To get away from London, to get away from the bureaucracy and the rubbish over there. Because Finland is a safe country. Yeah, exactly. Finland is a safe.
You need to protect your bicycle in summer.
Well, yeah, there is that. There is that. And I spoke to the police about this last week at Tampere. I said, what are you doing about the bicycle thefts in Turku, Helsinki and Tampere? And then he walked away. So, yeah. Ei mitään. So just to conclude, you know, I don't expect you all to be Jason Bourne, you know, or a sniper hiding in the bushes waiting for the next terrorist to walk along. But when you go to work, just be aware of your surroundings, you know. And if you're not sure, this is a plug for me now, okay? If your company's not sure, ask someone like me to come in and do it. We do penetration testing. You know, I've done it before with companies. I'll go in, I'll break into your house, steal your whiskey, and then, or vodka, drink it all and take a picture of myself, a selfie, and send it to you on Facebook. On serious, we do things like that. I've done things like that in the past, physical penetration testing. It always sounds so rude when you say that. Yeah.
Sounds now.
As we said, matron. So, yeah. So, there has to be a level, and it is improving. Helsinki is improving. You know, the guys I work with in Helsinki for the company that I freelance for sometimes, we are looking more into physical security. As I said, I don't expect anyone to be Jason Bourne. What was the next slide? Oh, yeah. So we've all done this. So again, thank you for inviting me here today. Now, I completely lost track of what I was saying halfway through that conversation, and I've probably forgotten a lot. Yeah, it happens when you turn 30, right? But, you know, there are other topics we can talk about on the physical security side, physical planning, security planning. And on a serious note, if you do own a small company, you know, or a startup, you know, it's scary. You think, Christ, I need to, you know, I'm not so much in insurance, but your staff welfare. And as your company grows, you need to look into your physical security side. And if you are unsure about it, and you don't know, then employ someone who does. Me. I've got 20 years experience in it. I worked in the Met. I lived in London. Christ, if there's not enough crime there. So happy birthday to everyone here for the second birthday, and obviously me as well. 44. Christ. Hey, I got pants older than some of you lot. Anyway, thank you very much for inviting me, and I hope you enjoyed it. Any questions? I know there were some burning questions. There's a chap there.
Yes, when you showed the slide about the run, hide, fight,
Yeah.
and then you talked about the need of policy, or an action plan.
Yeah.
Terrorism. Is it not so that if the terrorists are planning something, and if they know how we are going to act, they will use that. I mean, they detonate the bomb, and then they know that everybody is going to run out, so they place the next bomb at the corner. So I like running, so should I run away, towards, or nowhere? And is it actually bad to have a public policy that always...
Shouldn't be public. Should never be public. It's if you work on whatever company you work for, let's people work here for F-Secure, or whoever, I don't know what the companies are in Finland, should never ever be public. In fact, your security plan really should be with the lawyers of the company, because they know the legislation and the law. You know, there are various, you know, what do they say? Loose lips sink ships. Yeah? You know, so it's been, you know, always have ears. Has been the one since the Second World War. So you don't publicise your security plans. Never, ever. That's why I still, you know, fire plans. There are times when that cannot be the case. You know, for instance, cinemas, opera houses. If you go in, there has to be on the wall, under health and safety law, a security fire exit plans, because you can't expect in those environments to, you know, people come in for a cinema to watch the latest, I don't know, Star Wars or whatever film, and then you have to give them a fire safety briefing beforehand. It's not going to work, is it? Well, I'm talking about private security, I'm talking about private companies where you have your induction day and you're told about the fire risk assessments. And there's no legislation at the moment for active shooters or for any terrorist activity. You know, we're seeing in what's happening in America at the moment. It's very sad, extremely sad. You know, the last, my friend works for Oppinmäki in Espoo, which is an international school. I had a guy come in and did an assessment for an active shooter. And he told them that the best course of action is to run from the building. My question was, well, what's your intelligence, first of all? How many shooters have you got? Are you walking right into the line of fire? And where are they going to run to? Because as you just said, you put one shooter in the school and one shooter outside, and everyone's running out in a panic. So who's in control of it? Then he said, well, you secure a premises across the road where you can put people in the underground. Well, that's not secure then, is it? Because that company knows that you're going to use that if there's an active shooter. And then we talk about physical surveillance again. Because what criminals will do, and this has happened lots of times, is set off alarms, especially with banks. You know, we see it in films, it happens, but I'm talking about small companies. Where they want to rob, they'll set off the fire alarm. And they'll just sit back and watch you all. And time, took fire brigade 6 minutes to arrive. Took police 9 minutes to arrive, probably because they were having a bacon butty. But they time you, and this is what happens. It does happen. And during the London riots, which is I was there for 3 days, I witnessed drug gangs and known gang members pulling up in their cars, watching us, talking on their phones, and they would organise mobs to come into certain areas to distract the police, to draw the police away from shopping precincts, and then direct people over to rob those precincts. And that was happening all the time. We couldn't do anything about it because we were too busy getting petrol bombed. But it happens. Sorry, there was another question, and I can't remember.
Yeah. First, I want to point out the comical aspects of you talking about really dire subjects under the case. Okay?
Yeah.
The actual question. This is about privacy. How do you feel that the actual, we've seen a lot of, for example, clash against encryption from the officials.
Are we talking about, you talking about Finnish privacy law?
No, it's like a global and
surveillance.
In US, in Great Britain as well.
GCHQ?
Yeah.
WikiLeaks?
No. It's like a ban for encryption. Trying to.
You shouldn't be able to send completely private messages from.
Are you doing, like WhatsApp? Like WhatsApp at the moment?
Like Telegram that I liked, but then I realized that also ISIS likes it.
Mm.
Apparently,
When you start using it.
so apparently, the collective question is that what's your take on the actual like encryption or the actual privacy, or is it does of course it does make physical security harder in that case.
Well, if we take the Westminster attack, Khalid Mahood, who drove into Westminster and stabbed a friend of mine, he was WhatsApping prior to the attack. And because of the encryption on WhatsApp, the security services, MI5, were unable to access that information. I think someone mentioned Telegram, yeah, which is what ISIS use a lot. Again, we come down to computer science, and then to me, then I start getting foggy and pass out. So, if you're coming down to privacy laws, now I know the Finnish government want to bring in increased surveillance on the internet.
I'm not actually talking about the actual laws.
Yeah.
I'm talking about do you feel that it actually affects? Of course, it affects, but makes the work on physical security on national level, for example, a lot harder.
Yeah.
Or it does.
Yeah, because
Well, I'm talking about widely used encryption because the bad guys can find their way around the things.
Yeah.
So is there a lot of incidents where the bad guys have been able to or a situation has been able to get prevented because of interception of unencrypted
Not at the moment.
messages? Yes.
Not at the moment, no.
So,
For MI5 and counter-terrorism police, or any police on a lower level, it's. If I can give you a basic example, domestic violence. There was a case a little while ago in London, United Kingdom, for the Met Police, where a guy was accused of rape. it was all falsified by the person that accused him. However, because the police were not allowed to access the information on the accused's phone, and the amount of work that the police have to do regarding any accusation like that, this guy was dragged through the courts, and in the end, it took a court order to produce the evidence that he was nowhere near the scene, and it never happened. Now, and that side of things, that encryption and WhatsApp should be more accessible to the security services and to the police. But then I understand on the other side that you're entitled to your privacy. Not everyone that uses WhatsApp is a criminal or a terrorist. Well, they're one and the same, but not everyone's, I don't want someone accessing my, WhatsApp now and saying, I've just texted my wife saying I don't understand a bloody word anyone's saying in here. So, but, that it's difficult. Last year, the United Kingdom passed some of the strongest, what they call, and I'm going to say this, and it's a good job I'm not drunk, investigatory act. There we go. The United Kingdom has stronger surveillance laws and stronger powers to access your information than the United States. How many agencies are in the United States? It's ridiculous. There's just thousands of them. There's hundreds of them, We all know about GCHQ and the WikiLeaks and all that information that's been leaked. It's a very fine line. And I know last year the Finnish government was supposed to pass a law where they could then access information coming through the flow of the internet. That hasn't been passed. I think that makes it more difficult for the security services here in Finland, and not just Finland, but Sweden and the neighbours, because, again, you're not talking about terrorism, you're talking about, there's no Russians in here, is there? I'm not about to upset the Russians now.
There probably are.
They're probably listening.
Yeah. Okay. Privyet. There's a lot of crime coming from, look at the eastern side of Finland. You've got a lot of Russian mafia buying premises, Estonian mafia. So there's a lot of information coming across on the internet. And unfortunately, the Finnish services are not allowed to access it. So it's very difficult to do their job. Extremely difficult. But on the other hand, you all have the right to privacy. So it's...
If we make these common instant messages like WhatsApp more easily accessible for the police, then of course all the law-abiding persons will use it and it will be monitored. But the problem with criminals is that they won't follow the law, so they will get some other messages, so they escape it. So we are just risking the ordinary people, and then the criminals roam free. So I think there should be some kind of root cause thing, some social issues that actually cause this. And also this terrorism, like in Turku, this attack, there were warnings from around the person.
Yeah.
The closest community knows that now something bad is happening. They reported it forward, but then there was this backlog of 3,000 reports, and of course, this report got junked in all this data. And I think this is the problem, that there are people in the communities who actually know that that person is having some problems and getting radicalized, but how make it actionable.
Well, you mean intelligence coming through? I mean, if we talk about the Turku attack, we knew that information was coming from the Red Cross.
The information was coming from the other immigrants.
He was living in what's the area he was living in? Vansio.
Yeah, he was in the refugees.
Was it Metallikatu? The Metallikatu, where refugees go. So the information was coming from the actual people that were living there.
Yeah.
Okay, right.
So they saw this weird Uzbekistan or whatever. Anyway, that man talking to him and apparently gifting some items to him or something, and so apparently showing
him to the path of, hey, look at this way of Islam, and he took the bait, having been apparently somewhat unstable before. He had, I think he told like his roommate or something that he had killed a person before in some other European country.
Germany, I believe it was.
Maybe, but that was like unknown because his previous path is like not exactly known yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, and that was said in the court as well. And well, then it was reported, but that there's this weird
Uzbekistan.
that man, and well, it wasn't investigated until it was too late.
Is it more problematic to drown into the information than to like trying to pick out the signal from the noise that's already there? Like if we take out the encryption, the information we have available, the data, the amount of data will drown us because we already have enough information to be drowned into. So what's the benefit of getting more information
from encrypted,
unencrypting,
unencrypted.
banning the encryption? Like,
Well, look, listen, I mean, sorry, why you want to get drunk?
Let's continue tomorrow.
But I'll answer this question. I'll answer some. Well, I'll give you an example. Prior to the 7/7 attack, Mohammed Sadiq Khan and Shanwed Tanweer were talking to the MI5 and counter-terrorism police. Were following a terrorist cell that were planning to do a truck bomb, old IRA style terrorist attack, location unknown. They followed the prime suspect to a car park in the northwest of England. DIY, it's irrelevant, a car park. During that time that they were surveilling them and taking pictures, Mohammed Sadiq Khan and Shanwed Tanweer, unknown subjects at the time, were seen talking to the prime suspect. Photographs were taken, sent off to the CIA and to the American agencies and various other agencies. Because the pictures taken were so bad that they couldn't identify them. The security service at the time had enough going on and lack of resources. They had to prioritise what they were going to do. As at the moment, those two that were taken in the car park posed no threat. So they continued with their investigation, put a small intelligence report in, and shelved it. Forgot about it. They then went on to commit the attack. Now, you can't get it right all the time. And as MI5 chief has always said, there will be people that will sleep through the system. We don't have the resources. No country does.
Yeah, but you need to put resources in, taking out the encryption and, just pouring
physical facts.
Reading,
well, look,
reading from the
I'm going to be bold here, and I'm going to say.
But should you put the same money that you will put, opening all encrypted banning encryption in just more resources for policemen to?
Yeah, the encryption is a very small part.
Money
you
will put into the thing, so you could.
You've got 7,000 police officers in Finland. It's the smallest police force, I think, for maybe close to New Zealand. I don't know, but because it is safe here. It is safe here, so they don't need any policemen. However, they lack the experience that other countries do when it comes to terrorism. Now, I'm going to be bold here, and I think if there is information coming through from people that's saying that this person is showing signs of radicalisation or extremism behaviour, then there should have been an intervention. There is an intervention in the United Kingdom called Operation Prevent, and there's a channel system. Now, that doesn't always work, but it is growing, and people are being put through the channel system. And as I said to you, that doctor I spoke to before, he was part of that, and he sits down. Now, he's a Sunni Muslim, and he sits down with the community and speaks about radicalisation through spiritualisation. So there is a channel for them to go. Because as I said, and I think someone said here, he had mental health issues. So we need to challenge that. What is the ingredient? It's not someone just, I've got a thing about radicalisation, but someone just doesn't get radicalised just overnight. There are trigger points. It's a process. It's like, and I hate to say this, it's like child grooming. Yeah? There is a process that follows. And there's a vulnerability in the victim. And that's how it works. And they will prey on that vulnerability. And that's what happened with this guy. So, coming back to what you said, encryption is not the be-all and end-all. There needs to be money injected into... Now, I believe I understand this. Support is now separate from the police now. They now become a, if you like, intelligence service. And I really hope that they inject money into that environment so there are more intelligence officers and more trained officers that can deal with that. If you want to go and get a drink and get pissed when I'm talking... No, I'm driving. I can outrun the police. Yes, mate, go on.
Yeah, so you mentioned at some point that
Have we got an active shooter in the building?
you mentioned that in Finland you think that the mentality about security should change.
I don't think it should... yeah. Only because it makes me more money.
No, I mean, I'd like to know how you see that process going, because I might exaggerate slightly.
Go on.
I'm feeling that if you call the university or the administration and asking, so what's your plan for an active shooter, the first thing they'll do is ask, so what are you planning? Because people are not used to it. So the first one to talk about it will be probably considered as the one planning.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So maybe I'd like to know what would you recommend to change the mentality without putting us in danger? Particularly some of us who are not exactly from Finland.
Yeah, I understand. Well, look, I'll answer that. I can easily answer that question, can I? Right. After the 7/7 bombings, and this is a talk I did last week, after the 7/7 bombings, the Metropolitan Police and the police forces around the United Kingdom realised that not only was there a lack of communication between the internal departments, i.e. MI5 and counter-terrorism police and everyone else, but there was a lack of communication to the community. There has to be, to change the rhetoric, there has to be an open channel. People have to talk to each other. And coming back to what you said, what then happened was that the City London Police, in 2000, prior to the 7th, they had a thing called Project Griffin. And that was mostly talking about financial crime, but they adapted that to talk about the current threat. So I became part of that in 2008, and my job was to go into universities, to go into schools, to go into financial premises, to go into security premises, IT security premises, and give their staff security awareness training. Didn't mean scaring the shit out of them. I'm thinking, oh Christ, that's it, I'm going to walk around now, with my hoodie up and avoid everyone. But it was just to make everyone aware. It doesn't have to be frightening, but it just has to be advise people of your surroundings. And as I come back again, Finland is a safe country. Of course it is. They don't have the experience that perhaps London does, and perhaps Africa does, in certain areas of the country, and perhaps the US does. So we have different levels of violence, or different levels of what our security is. And it's just raising that awareness. Doesn't mean you stop your lives and carry on what you're doing. You go to concerts, everything like that, especially AC/DC. Well done. But yeah, so it's you can't just ring up university and say, "What are you going to do with an active shooter?" And then start breathing heavily down the phone, because suddenly you'll find a knock on the door from the police. But it has to be. We're all Europe. Well, I won't be anymore, but we're all part of Europe, and as I keep saying, terrorism holds no borders. And it's not just about, will there be another terrorist attack in Finland? There may never be. But I'll give you an example. Switzerland is a safe country. 2016, Europol arrested or organised for the Swiss police to go in and organise an ISIS terrorist cell that was using the internet through Tor and through the dark web to propaganda. So when I talk about terrorism, it doesn't mean that I'm talking about someone strapping a bomb to their back and walking into to Dunbar University, I'm talking about terrorist cells. I'm talking about there are people in countries that are organising terrorism within that country to conduct terrorism in another country. It doesn't necessarily have to be about terrorism in the country. So, and it's about raising people's awareness to perhaps behaviour of colleagues. Things will change, and I'll come back to right-wing extremism. That's something that's very rife in Nordic countries and Scandinavian countries. Denmark, the Danish in here. I'm not going to insult everyone, are I? Hey, I'm British, so I'm English. Go on.
Okay, so one more.
Can I have a beer?
Let's talk about the encryption. So let's expand the discussion a bit. Outside of the Western world, for example, where we are pretty much safe to say what we feel.
Yeah.
I pretty much work every day, full day, to encrypt as much of any communication as possible.
Yeah.
And especially for example, the oppressive governments and the actual laws that we're somewhat fighting against in favor of vulnerable communities. It's still trying to encrypt as much as possible to allow people at least the kind of power of free speech that we have in the Western world. But at the same time, if you undermine that effort in sake of a part of a feeling of security in the Western world, I feel that it's like a counter-effective in every possible way. And my question is that how you feel about that, expanded, scope of the gathering intelligence automatically in that sense.
Does anyone know? I'll answer this question with a question. Does anyone know what fundamentalism is?
Sorry?
Fundamentalism.
Yeah.
Does anyone care to explain? I know what it means, but does anyone explain what fundamentalism means?
When you take an idea
Make
and
no
put
exceptions.
forth too much extreme version of it.
Yeah. Well, let's face, for instance, I'm Roman Catholic, right? Not anymore. I turned 16 and found girls a beer, but. So I'm Roman Catholic, yeah? That's my religion, okay? So let's just say I go to church every Sunday, I'm fundamental about the religion that I support, it's not a football team, but, that I believe in, yeah? And it's the same as friends that I have back home who are Muslim, they're very fundamental about their religion, strict about their religion, yeah? But it doesn't mean, and their interpretation of the Quran and interpretation of the Bible, they have strict rules and guidelines, yeah? If we take the terminology jihad, if you read into it properly in the Quran, it has nothing to do with violence. It's a moment of celebrating your love of Allah, going towards jihad. But as soon as I start saying to you, well, jihad means you must kill the Jafar, the non-believer, then you're going into extremism. And that's where the fine line is. And if you look at people like Anjem Choudhury, who was a hate preacher in the United Kingdom, he got sentenced to 5.5 years in 2016 for what they call supporting a prescribed group, ISIS. For 20 years, he preached hate in London. He wanted Sharia law. I can show you pictures of him in universities talking about Sharia law. I went to I had to deal with him many years ago to stop him to go into a university that he was prevented from doing so. Not a very nice man. But freedom of speech. What he was talking about, there's no law against it. Sharia law exists in certain countries, in Qatar, Saudi Arabia, although it's changing now. But it does exist in certain parts of Somalia, in certain parts of Syria now, on the west of Syria. ISIS have taken over a village. So it does exist. but it doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just when you take it beyond the fundamentalism and turn it to extremism. And that's the fine line. So it took police 20 years, counter-terrorism, and put bugs everywhere, and he's, bugged the hell out of him. Probably got a bug on his bum, probably, I don't know. And they finally caught him supporting the most recent attack back in 2016, 15. So when you talk about encryption and you uncrypt things, and what is fundamentalism and freedom of speech, and then what is extremism? Extremism, I would suggest, is encouraging someone else to do an act of violence against another group.
But that's the whole kind of point. You don't get to know what's the actual data. At the same time, it could be like, for example, sexual minorities in countries where it automatically means death, or journalists trying to get a message through the actual a network of a government monitoring all the traffic.
You come back to journalism. Journalists use WhatsApp a lot to protect their sources. So once you start encrypting that, you're breaching their freedom of speech, their press right, to have their sources. Some of their sources are probably not legit.
I think, of course, your police officers are new protecting a good country with good laws, and that's morally very acceptable, and I feel we have the same fight in this. But on a more theoretical level, I think that if governments can read everything we discuss between people in the communities, then that's a problem. Historically, I'm looking back a few centuries. There was this illegal thing, this independence of United States. It was a British colony, and it was
another Brexit.
An action of mutiny, and that should have been stopped. The world would be much better now. And then the French Revolution, this idea of
Americans.
Stupid thing of democracy. They had, the king would have stopped this. Finnish independence would have been stopped, and also the fact that the government and the Nazi Germany, of course, and the East Germany, and the list goes on, North Korea. So total control can be bad. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but I don't buy the idea that total surveillance would actually benefit us when decades and centuries go past.
No, I agree with you, and I think the lady just here said China. China's got one of the strictest internet laws in the world. Sorry? Russia's pretty close, yeah. China's the worst.
But in China, everything is so corrupt that you can buy yourself out of it.
Yeah.
If you have money.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, very true. But so is Russia. Anyway, I know.
Thank you.